guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today we are going to be talking about the 18 series I would really love to finish by the end of 2021. So this is the second part of my mid-year series check-in. The first part had all of my DNF series I've completed and series I'm up to date on so far this year. And this video is going to be the 18 series that I have either started or made progress on this year, but I have still yet to finish. So this is my big video of shame. I really need to stop doing this. I've been doing damage control since 2019, trying not to have so many series I'm in the middle of, and it's just not working out for me. I will say though that I thought that there were going to be 20 series in this video. There are only 18, and just overall the amount of series we're dealing with this year is a little bit less than last year. So I'm making steps in the right direction, but it's just not quite there. I just need to finish some series. So this video is not going to be in any particular order because I stacked them up for a thumbnail. The stack collapsed. So I'm just going to be grabbing at books, telling you a little bit about what they're about, how many I've read in the series, and if there's any particular reasons why I haven't been continuing, like dragging my feet or something, or if I expect to be finished with the series anytime soon. I do have a little stack of manga and comics though, so we are going to be starting off with those. And the first one we're talking about is Children of the Whales by Abi Umeda. So this is like a young adult, new adult fantasy manga series that follows a 12-year-old boy called Chakuro, who is the archivist on something called the Mud Whale, which is a island that floats along on the sea of sand. The people of the Mud Whale have never known anything outside of their own community, but one day when they pass another floating island, they scout it for supplies and find a young girl there, and she pretty much throws open the world. I've been reading this series for a long time now. I don't know whether I started it in 2019 or the beginning of last year, but I'm currently 8 volumes into it. 3 of those volumes I have read this year, and there are at least 16 in total. I don't know if there's any more coming that are not released yet, but I know that there is a minimum of 16. So I need to get a move on. We also have Dreaming Sun by Ichigo Takano. This one is a shoujo manga, so it is like a young adult contemporary that follows a teenage girl who is feeling very pushed out in her family. Her mother died a while ago, her father has remarried, and there is a new baby, and she decides to run away. And when she does this, she finds a drunk guy passed out in the park, and he offers her a place to live, providing she fulfills 3 conditions. The first one is that she tells him why she ran away. The second is that she finds his missing house key, and the third is that she has a dream and falls in love. This one is like super cute, super funny, really light-hearted, really just puts me in a good mood. As you may be able to tell from the synopsis, it has a couple of problematic elements, like has this girl ever heard of stranger danger? But overall it's like a young adult kind of new girl. I'm currently 4 volumes into this, and I believe that there are 10 in this series. Next up is Isola by Brendan Fletcher and Carl Kerschel. This one is an adult high fantasy comic book series that is about a guard who is trying to get the queen to this mythical land of Isola because the queen has been turned into this big glowing tiger, and they believe that if they get to Isola they will be able to reverse this spell. So I've read 2 volumes of this, and I think that the third is going to be published later this year, so I'm currently up to date with everything that's been published. As far as I'm aware, that 3rd volume isn't out yet, but this one is very heavily reliant on the images. There's not a whole ton of text on the page, and I really struggle with processing things visually without any like text to give it context. I'm just not, like, my brain just does not work that way. So I do not know if this series is going to be for me overall, but I am going to at least read that 3rd volume and then probably make a decision on this series going forward. It's a shame because I adore the art style of this, and what I can understand of the story I also enjoy, but it's just a big struggle bus. We then have the Buffy reboot by Jordi Belair, Dan Mora and Raul Angelo. This one is a modernized version of the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which, if you guys are unfamiliar with that, it is about a young woman called Buffy who is a vampire slayer, and she is the one person in her generation who has been tasked with fighting back against the forces of evil. So the TV show started off in 1996, so this is the same characters we love but in a modernized setting. There are, I believe, 5 volumes of this so far, but there's also 2 spin-offs. One follows Angel, one follows Willow. There's also an Angel and Spike, which is a continuation from Angel, and there's also like crossover events. So I've I've only read this one installment so far, but I cannot really tell you how many I have to read because there's a lot going on in this new rebooted universe. And the last of the comics is Rat Queens by Curtis J. Weeb. This one is an adult high fantasy swords and sorcery comic that follows 4 boozy battle maidens for hire, and after starting one bar fight too many, they are thrown into jail and they have to perform quests for the realm to be released. So I started this comic series in 2019 and I've currently read 6 volumes. I believe that there are 8 published so far, and I do have volumes 7 and 8, so I'm so close to finishing it. But there was an art style change quite early on in this, and it took me a little bit of time to adjust to the new art style, so I was leaving big spaces in between the installments so that the art style change wouldn't be quite so jarring to me, which is why it's taken me so long to progress through this. But I have so far read 3 volumes of this year, so I am picking up momentum, and as far as I'm aware I only have 2 to go. I don't think volume 9 is going to be released until next year. Moving away from the graphics, we have the Tawny Man Trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is the trilogy that we're currently working on for Elderlingalong. It is the 3rd trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings to date. This is the continuation of the main character of the 1st trilogy story, Fitzchivalry Farseer. So in the Farseer trilogy, Fitzchivalry is left on the steps of the keep by his maternal grandfather, who wants him to go back to the man who sired him, who happens to be the prince in waiting, Prince Chivalry. So Chivalry finds out that Fitz is approaching and he abdicates the throne and moves to the countryside, which leaves Fitz in an awkward position where nobody really knows what to do with him. So he is predominantly raised by the stable master of the keep, Burrick, until he comes of an age where the king starts to take interest in him and he is trained to be the royal assassin. So the Farseer trilogy follows Fitz from the ages of 6 to around 20, and the Tawny Man trilogy picks up when Fitz is 35, so 15 years after the original trilogy. This one focuses a little bit more on the magic and the magical factions of the world as opposed to the politics in the 1st trilogy, and it is part of like the grand overarching plot of the realm of the Eldlings, but it's following like a smaller story arc throughout this trilogy. So at this current moment in time, I have only read Fool's Errand. Shortly after filming this, I'm going to be picking up the 2nd book in this series, Golden Fool, and this will definitely be done by the end of the year because I'm hosting, like my book club is reading it, we're hosting a read along for this. Another one for a read along that will definitely be finished by the end of the year is the Witchlands series by Susan Dennard. This one is a like young adult, new adult high fantasy series that follows a girl called Safi who is a truth witch, which means that she has the ability to tell when people are lying. Right at the beginning of this series, Safi is caught by a blood witch, and blood witches have the ability to scent your blood and then track you over hundreds of miles. So from that moment, Safi is on the run with her best friend Isola because she has been keeping the fact that she is a truth witch a secret. This sends both Safi and Isola and the blood witch Adrian into this really complex political plot that centers around a 20-year treaty that is soon to be coming to a close. So the reason I'm confused about the demographic of this is because it has the pacing and the characters and kind of the writing of a young adult series, but the complexity of the politics and the world and how dense some of that can be is a little bit more adult. But regardless, I'm reading this series for the Witchlands read along, of which I am a co-host, and at this point I have read the first 3 books in this series plus the novella, and the only one I have left to go is Witch Shadow, which has just been published, and I'll be reading that in the next month. The series won't be finished, there will be 1 book left, but I will be up to date. One that I'm not sure if I will be DNFing is the Babble series by Alexis Henderson. The first book is The Year of the Witching. I read the first book earlier this year and the second book is going to be released later this year, I think. But this one is a historical fantasy that takes place in this very religious community. It's really gross, like it's a really uncomfortable setting where you have this prophet that kind of rules the community and he has loads of wives, and it's very like antiquated gender roles, and like women have a certain role and they can't do certain things and they have like limited rights, and the main character is drawn into the Darkwood, which is a forbidden place, and given the diary of her dead mother by the ghosts of witches. So this one didn't leave much of an impact on me, as right now I cannot remember very much about it or why I didn't like it, but the sequel is going to be released later this year, so I don't know if I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna leave that decision till when the sequel is released and see how I feel, but this one is a possible DNF. We also have the Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett. This one is an adult epic multi-perspective fantasy series set in this world that is ruled by demons, and the demons come out at night. In the history of this world, the humans used to fight back against the demons. However, now they just resort to hiding from them. So they paint wards on all of their houses, and as soon as the sun sets, they all just wait inside until the sun rises again and they come out. However, there are instances where the wards are worn down, and so demons get in, and there are quite a few instances of humans still being murdered by demons. So the dominant character in here is Arlen, and he is very fed up with this, and he wants to find a way to fight back against the monsters. So he decides he would like to become a messenger to learn some of the skills to defeat demons, or at least hold them back a little bit better than just hiding from them. So this is the first book in a, I think it's a 5-book series, but I think Peter V. Brett has just released a new book that might be a new series set in this world. There is a lot of sexism in this book that I didn't really enjoy, and I read this at a bad time. So I didn't have a great impression of this first book. I am going to continue and at least read the next book in the series, but I haven't decided if I'm going to be continuing on from there, because I have heard that the second book is awful, but then some people really loved the first 2 books and then hated the rest, and there are very mixed opinions on this series. But because of the time when I read this, which was just not generally a good time for me to be reading anything, but I needed the distraction, I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and at least pick up book 2. Next up we have a chunk of romance. So the first series is the Brown Sisters series by Talia Hibbert. This is a series of standalone kind of romantic comedy novels that are connected with all of the main characters being sisters. So the first book, Get a Life Chloe Brown, follows our main character Chloe Brown, and after a near-death experience, Chloe decides that she's going to make a list of things that she thinks she could do to help her get a life, and the first step in this is for her to move out and get her own place. There she meets the superintendent of the building, Red, and they really don't get along because he has some past issues where he was in an abusive relationship, and Chloe has elements of her personality that remind him of that person, but she enlists his help with her Get a Life list, and it's a romance between the two. So at this current moment, I have read Get a Life Chloe Brown, I have also read Take a Hint Danny Brown, and the last book is actually on my July TBR, which is Act Your Age Eve Brown, so this one will be done soon as well. This year I also started the Wicked Villain series, the first book being Desperate Measures. This one is a series of very erotic contemporary romances that are inspired by Disney villains. So the first book, Desperate Measures, is about Jasmine and Jafar from Aladdin, and in this world Jasmine's father is a territory boss and Jafar is seeking some more territory for himself, so he gets rid of Jasmine's father and takes over all of Jasmine's father's territory, and in the claiming of all of this property he also takes control of Jasmine herself. So this is a series of like BDSM erotic romances. They are kind of standalone, like they're all set in a fictional city called Carver City, and some of the characters who are going to be the main characters of later books are present in this first book, but they don't necessarily need to be read back to back. You don't have to remember a lot about the first book to read the rest of them, as far as I'm aware. So I have not continued with this series yet, but I really love this. Like the smut in this is really good, and I'm very excited to continue on with the series. Next up we have the Kingmaker Chronicles by Amanda Boucher, the first book being A Promise of Fire, and this one is a high fantasy romance series that is heavily inspired by ancient Greece. Our main character Kat is a soothsayer in the circus, and she has joined the circus because she is hiding from some elements in her past. The love interest in this one is Griffin, and his family have just taken over one of the areas of the world. This world is traditionally ruled by magic wielders. However, Griffin's family do not wield magic, so Griffin is out looking for somebody who has the magic necessary to help his family hold their territory. So I read this back in February. I really enjoyed it. It's a really fast-paced romance. It's also slightly funny, which I didn't expect, and I have been desperate to continue ever since, but my TBR has just not allowed me to. However, I think I may have wrapped up, well, I was gonna say, I think I may have wrapped up the majority of the fantasy romance series I'm currently reading just before I'm about to show you more fantasy romance series that I'm currently reading. But I think in terms of priorities, if fantasy romance comes up on Bookopoly, it will be this series that I am prioritizing completing before the others. We then have the Fae Chronicles by Amelia Hutchins, and this one is a low fantasy romance series that involves witches and the Fae. So the main character Sin is part of a coven, and she is sent to speak to the Dark Prince of the Fae, who has an assignment for her, and he would like her to impersonate his fiance, who is the princess of the Light Fae, because they believe that somebody is going to try and assassinate her. And while the Dark Prince's fiance does not have the ability to defend herself, Sin bears a remarkable resemblance to her, and she does have the abilities to defend herself. However, she really hates the Fae. So I didn't really like this series. There was weird sections from the Prince of the Dark Fae that were just really creepy, and I didn't like the plot. However, there was just something about this series that made me want to continue. I can't say how far into this series I'm going to want to get with me not enjoying the first book. I gave the first book 2 stars, but I am at least willing to give it one more book to see how it develops. I don't know. I didn't like it, but I was really curious, so I'm gonna continue a little bit. We then have the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. This one it's fantasy romance, but there's not a lot of romance in the first book, and I think maybe the first couple of books in the series don't have a ton of romance. But this one follows a young woman called Mackenzie, whose sister was studying abroad in Ireland when she was brutally murdered, and the police have decided to drop the case. So Mackenzie decides to travel over to Ireland to see if she can figure out what happened to her sister, and in doing this she stumbles across the realm of the Fae. So I was told that this series gets better as it goes along, and that if I don't like the first book, to persevere with it, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by the first book, because I was going into it expecting to really hate it. There are some things I don't like about it, like the main character is just like, she's a choice, but I do believe she grows up and like matures and gets better throughout the course of this series. So I am really interested in continuing this one. It's just not like a huge priority right now, but if I could read at least a couple more books in this series before the end of the year, then that would be great. Moving away from the romance, we have the book of the Ancestor series by Mark Lawrence, the first book being Red Sister. This one is set in a convent called the Sisters of Sweet Mercy, where the nuns are being trained to be assassins. So our main character in this one is Nona Gray, and she is taken from the execution block to the Sisters of Sweet Mercy, where she begins her training. I really enjoyed this. All of this first book is set in the convent, and you go through the process of like Nona learning these assassin skills. So you have classes and stuff. It has like a school setting, and in between each section of this book it jumps to the future. So you have this constant like intrigue of how the characters got to that future setting that runs throughout this, and I'm really excited to continue this one. I've only read the first book so far. It is a trilogy, and I think there is a spin-off series where the second book is about to be published or has just been published. But yeah, I hope that I can finish this one out this year as well. This one is kind of a priority for me. And then the rest of the books are Bronna Sanderson. So first up we have Skyward. This is a young adult sci-fi series that follows a main character called Spencer, who wants nothing more than to be a fighter pilot. However, her father was a pilot and he deserted, and this has cast a shadow over Spencer and her family's life, where like her family aren't even allowed to have real jobs, and Spencer is not allowed to join the military academy. I read the first book last year. This one mainly focuses on the academy and her trying to get into it. The second book takes it to a new location. I read that one in 2021 and I didn't enjoy that one so much. And the third book, Cytonic, has not been released yet. It's going to be released towards the end of this year. So this one is kind of a priority for me in that I anticipate that I will pick up the third book as soon as it's released, but I just hope that I enjoy it more than book 2. I really liked book 1, book 2 not so much, so I hope that the series picks up again for me in book 3. We then have the Mistborn series. The first book being The Final Empire. This one is an adult epic fantasy series that takes place in this world that is ruled by the Dark Lord and has been ruled by the Dark Lord for 1,000 years. So a man called Kelsier puts together a team of gifted allomancers who have the ability to ingest metals and harness abilities from that to take down the Final Empire. I'm 2 books into this now. I read this one last year. This book is my favorite Sanderson book thus far. I read book 2 this year, really enjoyed it, not quite as much as this one, and I just have Hero of Ages to go, which I've heard is one of the best conclusions to a series that many people have read. So I'm highly anticipating that one, and I definitely want to read Hero of Ages by the end of the year. And then the final one for this video is the Stormlight Archive by Sanderson. This is once again an adult epic high fantasy series. This one surrounds a war between the Alethi, which are one of the kingdoms of the world, and the Parshendi, which are a different species. And the reason that those two are at war is because the Parshendi orchestrated the assassination of the Alethi king at a peace treaty. So it took me a while to warm up to this series, but I'm currently 3 books deep. This is just the first half of book 1. Each of the books in this series are quite long. I think this is the shortest at maybe around 900. Does this one go over 1,000? But the other 2 are like 1,300, 400 pages, but the rest are closer to like 1,500 pages. So I started this series last year. I read the 3rd book, Oathbringer, in January, and I haven't read the 4th book, which was released last year, Rhythm of War, yet, because this is the series that ties the Cosmere together. So this is like somehow tied into this series at some point, and I believe that book 4 in the Stormlight Archive is where all of the elements of the Cosmere start coming together. And I have not yet finished the Cosmere yet, because I need to finish this series, and then there's also like a second era of Mistborn which I haven't even started. So I'm hoping to catch up with everything and then get to this, and hopefully I would love to read Rhythm of War this year. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be great if I could catch up on the Cosmere by the end of 2021. So there you have it. Those are all of the series that I have either started or made progress on in 2021. Please wish me luck. Cross your fingers that I can have a much bigger stack of series finished by the end of this year, because this is actually ridiculous, because this is not all of the series that I'm in the middle of. These are just the ones that I've read something from in 2021. It's a real problem. I never used to be like this. I used to start a series and then finish it and not pick up any other book in a series until I'd finished the one I was already working on. And now we're here where I have, I think, over 40 series currently open. But down in my comments, please let me know what series you would like to finish by the end of the year. And aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you will find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go when nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.